Good evening, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. Hopping on to talk to everybody tonight about some educational reform. We all send our kids to school, and it's one of the main responsibilities that we're handing over to somebody else for our convenience. And we see people today more and more getting involved in the homeschooling, and I see a lot of problems still arising out of it because of two things. And first, I want to point out the aspect of homeschooling today is something that people do by taking their little ones out of the public education system entirely to homeschool them, and that's a good concept. But we're going about it the wrong way because we're entering into contracts of homeschooling itself by what they call homeschooling, and then directing you to follow a curriculum, a standard curriculum. And that's not the intent of homeschooling. Homeschooling, we're teaching our young our own beliefs and concepts of life, period. Whether it has to do with a fictional construct of a commercial system or a spiritual basis of a religion or a church or anything like that, it's our responsibility to teach our young, period, plain and simple. And so today I want to talk about the advantage of homeschooling tactics that we can employ, but specifically not by excluding our young from the public educational system, but by going ahead and keeping them involved in that system until we can slowly import our own homeschooling directives independently by ourselves. And basically what I'm talking about here again is we've got this public education system, and then people want to do the homeschooling, so they take them out of the public education system, but then turn around and register in a homeschooling program. That's not the objective of homeschooling. Homeschooling is independently based, not on a standard evaluation. And so when we talk about these homeschooling tactics, I want to bring in the old adage, it takes a village to raise a child. And in that same aspect, we have to realize, even myself as an adult, I continue to learn things. And that's not biased and limited by specifics of who I discern that I should listen to. I listen to everybody and everything in my life, and I learn from all of it, including our younger generations, as well as my older generation, as well as those of my own age. And so we have to be cognizant of the fact that we can learn from our younger generations, and we need to be aware that they are teaching us things in particular aspects when considering modern technologies and advances in those aspects in regards to our older generations. And so when we talk about the concept of it takes a village to raise a child, I'm hoping to impress upon people that it takes a child to inform or to raise a village as well. And what I'm talking about here is we spend so much time and money and effort and concern in this financial system that we create an even further debt by sending our little ones to daycares and our older ones to retirement homes. And then we have these after-school programs that we have to pay taxes for by registering our children into these public education systems, when we can do that all through homeschooling programs under that concept. It takes a village to raise a child. If we want to raise that child, we've got to be willing to listen to him and comprehend how he sees things in a more modern aspect in regards to the way we were raised, and be able to arbitrate those differences and help employ our younger generation's wants, needs, and desires into our own, and be able to incorporate the daycare centers and the single moms and single dads that are on welfare without any jobs, and the older folks that are going to these retirement homes. Why don't we start establishing smaller programs within even the secular societies where these people can get together and perform those functions on an agreement basis, one-to-one? Why can't we come to a point to realize that we have our unlimited powers of contract, and that means on a private basis, and we don't have to imbue the benefits of a third-party intervener as a corporate entity or a contractual service from somebody else to provide daycare services or a retirement home or village? Why can't we do that ourselves? In these PMAs that we establish, if we establish them accordingly, we purchase our lands and make land patents, and we establish larger communities. On private land, they have no authority to discern any kind of regulation, including education. And so when we start developing our own lands, and we have 3, 4, 5 generations of people living on that same parcel of land. Say you got 5,000 or 500 acres, and you've got a good environment to do your own gathering of whatever you need. That was freely provided, and live a self-sustaining, prosperous, and abundant life. And so when we think about this public education and reforming it as it is now, instead of taking our young ones out of the public education system and inadvertently entering them into another system, again, just like I talk about with doing our bills and doing our offsets and discharges and stuff, it's one step at a time. We have to learn how to do this one step at a time, and know that sometimes it's not wise to just pull your children from school and try to homeschool them if you don't have any kind of experience, particularly when there aren't any kind of real people with real experiences in this, except those communities that live self-sustaining lives. Go to an Amish community and ask them how they teach their young. I guarantee you they're going to teach their young concise English, and it's going to be very literate, and they're going to comprehend it precisely. So they can't be fooled. So when it comes to this public education system, get involved in their lives instead of just homeschooling, taking them out of that public education and doing the homeschooling. Get involved in that life by doing extra homeschooling, or start taking back that homeschooling responsibility and start educating them at home. My parents did it. Anytime I needed to study anything, they had a library of all kinds of stuff. They had Time Life magazines, National Geographic, Britannica encyclopedias, all kinds of just literature and stuff to use for my school as extra material, aside from what they use for their own curriculum. They taught me how to garden. They taught me how to cook. They taught me how to do my finances and budgeting. They didn't teach me the true aspect of it in regards to how the commercial system operates, because they were indoctrinated as well to do it a certain way without having a need to know for other certain variables, because the bankers always did it. The lawyers always did it. The judges always determined it. Well, before we had this public education system, how do you think we learned it? It's because our parents taught it to us. They homeschooled us. It wasn't called homeschooling. It was called life. And it was a responsibility to teach us everything they knew. So they taught us about math, reading, and arithmetic, everything they could. It's only when we become agriculturalized, communalized, secular societies where they gathered up in these big communities and started depending on some kind of benefit because some people couldn't live within that community. There was a time where natives, and I've spoken on this many times as well, people by nature are nomadic, and the natives, when they traveled when they went north in the summertime or south in the wintertime, if the elderly couldn't keep up in their migration, if they were ill and sickly and couldn't keep up, and they had no way of supporting them, they were left. And that's why we have societies, because we have this passion that we don't want to leave anybody behind. We want to take care of them. Yet we turn around and we put them in retirement homes after we start them out in life by sending them to daycares. We're giving up all these responsibilities, and we need to start taking them back. But we've got to be logical and rational and thoughtful about it. We've got to be knowledgeable and foresightful of what could possibly happen. You know, and like I said, today we see issues rising because people are trying to assert their homeschooling. Yet the regulatory commission saying, well, you're not keeping up. No child left behind. And so you're still subjecting yourself to a regulatory commission that's trying to say, well, your child is not standard. Your child doesn't have to be standard. Your child needs to learn how to be independent. Four documents to declare a state. First one is Declaration of Independence. Then you have a constitution that tells people, others, what constitutes you. You come in peace and love. Then you have the Articles of Confederation. In today's world, it's a commercial world, it's a Articles of Corporation. And that's your regulations and stuff. And then, of course, you have your treaties, your Treaty of Peace. Basically an arbitration clause. Bring in a third party to arbitrate disputes. So think about this stuff, people, and realize there's a lot better ways of doing things, and we need to learn how to fine-tune them and guideline them according to our own needs. If you can pull your kids from a public education system and be perfectly legitimate and fine with homeschooling them with the regulatory system or without, then do so. But if you don't comprehend the totality of the concept of homeschooling to begin with, I urge you, comprehend that first. It's not a matter of somebody else's regulations. It's a matter of your responsibility. Yeah, you're responsible to pass on your thoughts and beliefs and concepts to your young ones. It's not your responsibility to regulate somebody else's regulations upon your children. So I urge you, if you're going to get involved with the homeschooling, again, comprehend the totality of it. It's a matter of, it takes a village to raise a child, and the obverse, it takes a child to educate the village on how to raise that child. We've got to let these little minds, these young minds, become open. Quit killing them off with these vaccinations. And I just posted an interesting video the other day somebody passed along to me about allowing our young ones to watch these YouTube videos that are just insanely stupid and yet grotesquely vulgar. And this is what's indoctrinating them into believe that life is nothing but a fictional cartoon. I do my best not to talk to little ones like a child. I talk to them just like I talk to you. Talk to them like an adult. Treat them as an equal. You'd be amazed at how many of those little kids can be presidents, and how much they can far surpass any president we've had already. You just open their minds and let them open according to their own free will. Let their heart guide them, because no child is born with hate in their heart. I guarantee you that. That's a learned trait. That's homeschooled. They learned that somewhere. Because I know I never raised my kids to have hate in their heart. They learned that at the school. They learned it because nobody could explain the differences to them at school. It wasn't their job. Their job is to follow a curriculum. Whether you like it or not, the Indians were slaughtered. Whether you like it or not, the black people were slaughtered. Whether you like it or not, the Jews were slaughtered. Whether you like it or not, people get slaughtered. People get slaughtered today. You have to live with the truth, and that's one of the best things about homeschooling. With the public education system, when your kid comes home from school, and homeschooling, when your kid comes home from school, you get to school them at home by teaching them the differences. You get to show them the flip side. Columbus didn't actually discover America. He realized America was there and sent forth somebody else to explore it. It was already there. People were already there. People already knew it existed. They called it something else. I hear they called it Turtle Island. I've heard it's been called many things. I hear today it's called Egypt. Some people say it's Africa, the original Africa. So we got to think about this stuff and realize what public education is about and what homeschooling is about is helping keep the open mind, as opposed to that public education where they're delineating it and trying to get you to format yourself into one military line. Line up, in formation. So think about this stuff and realize there's a lot of things to life that we need to think about in regards to teaching our young, and it goes so much farther beyond any public education system, particularly when that public education system doesn't tell them about their supposed civic duties or their inherent duties to love thy neighbor as thyself, love thy God with all thy heart, body, and soul, so that they can treat each other equally. And that's not to say that they have to have a God or anything, but to understand or comprehend the concept of treating each other equally. If you think you have a certain right to do something, then you better expect other people have that same right, even if you're foreign to them. So I hope everybody catches on and realizes it's the biggest responsibility is our own in educating our younger generation, and we've given up that responsibility as a matter of convenience, and we need to start taking that back. Start schooling our people at home. Schooling them, bringing them together. And like I said, it's not a matter of schooling our younger generation, it's schooling our people. Just like a school of fish, they all gather together. We need to gather together in these communities, whether they be in just little ways of helping each other do things. It's the only way it's going to work. You know, when you've got these older generations that people are sending into retirement homes and stuff, we have associations that are big enough that can take care of pretty much any problem any of those retirement homes have. You have an association that's big enough that you've got private member associations were derived originally on private medical associations. That's why when you look up PMAs, you see a lot of information in regards to medical reasons, medical determinations. It's your own self-determination to look out for your spiritual health and your physical health, both. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, and under that religion, I believe I have full reign and accountability for my own health. I was given dominion of the land, air, and water to take advantage, to be able to use all of the life that exists within that land, air, and water, and the plants and seeds, and be able to take care of my own health. And I have a right to be private in that manner. So it comes down to being able to determine what you're going to educate your younger generation on. Are you going to allow them to be delineated by the public education system itself? Are you going to pull them from that public education system and give them only your side and tell them that everything that the public education system puts out is a lie? Or are you going to help show them that the information on both sides is discernibly different, and they are allowed to have an open mind so they can discern for themselves what is true? There are distinct differences in this, and when you go imposing your own beliefs and everything upon somebody, then you're imposing them. Whereas if you leave it as a option to allow them to see all the facts and information by being open-minded enough yourself to show both sides, you know, and this is the purpose of going into these courtrooms and accepting the charge. I accept the facts on the record, and I hereby place conditions upon that acceptance, in that the prosecution must now accept additional facts in concern with these, in reference to these matters that are paramount, and rebut his statements. So think about this stuff, people, and realize the whole education system is a foundation of indoctrinating you into a certain pattern, and it's a commercial pattern. I was just speaking to a gentleman today, and we spoke about Rockefeller. Rockefeller was on the Board of Education, I believe. I've still got to do some research on that. But Rockefeller was on the Board of Education, and one of the comments he made was something similar to the lines of educate them in the way you wish to educate them, and they'll be perfect little slaves. You can make every last one of them a perfect little slave by educating them young. Start out educating them young, and you can make them perfect little slaves. And so we send them to preschool. Uh-oh. Get them prepared to taking orders from somebody else instead of mom and dad. Taking orders. Being directed, be administered. Giving somebody else authority over our children. So that when you're 48 years old, your mom can look at you and say, Keith, the police are your authority. Mom, can you ever tell me when you've taken authority then? You've always handed me off to the pastor or the school teacher or somebody. So we got to think about this stuff and what is really our responsibility. Our responsibility is to protect our younger generation 24/7 and not be handing them off to somebody else. So again, I urge you to try to reform this public education system, but do it according to your capabilities. If you can't participate in helping other people take care of their children in a homeschool tactic, or provide some kind of barter exchange, then at least do some research on it and see what you can do as far as vocalizing it and putting information out about it. Both sides of the track. All you educators, I know a lot of you educators really appreciate your job, and you really do it just like doctors do it for the health in the health industry. They start out doing it because they really do have some kind of genuine concern and care. Same with a lot of police officers. Somehow along the line, the path gets diverted, the mind gets perverted, and things get subverted. Everything gets hypothecated. A secondary path becomes available, and we decide we have a choice to make. And somehow that choice seems to be better for us, and we forget our next generation. Get caught up in greed, selfishness, self-centeredness. We have to realize that's our own destruction. We pay for our father's sins, and in saying that, we have to rectify our own sins in order to help prevent our children from having to pay for our sins. And the only way to do that is by stepping forward. Start educating people, or start putting the information out so they can start learning. I try not to profess that I educate anybody anymore, because that's not the right aspect to look at it. I simply put out an opinion based upon my experience and beliefs. And hopefully I can present it in a manner that's a positive aspect for others to see, and a goal that they can introduce, or a portion of goal or a concept that they can introduce into their own goals, so that we can all come together, like I said, in a group, as we're meant to be. Spiritually, we're bound. Physically, we're foreign. Are we going to listen to some manual that's written down by the hand? Or are we going to listen to "In beginning was Word" and realize it's a spiritual thing? It's a vibration between us. It's an energy between us. And the more we use that energy in a positive aspect, in prosperity and abundance, not just in the material things that we gain freely through his dominion, but through the intellectual things that we learn and we can pass on. I don't know that anybody is ever born full of knowledge, and therefore we have to pass that on. And today we know that that our younger generation, like I was saying, they have open minds. We need to help keep them open so they can grow and express themselves accordingly. We see today more minds at a younger age that are open and learning like you wouldn't believe. 2- and 3-year-olds that are learning to read and write, simply because we're progressing along this path. It does happen. It's getting better. It's getting more and more. So we need to step up and be active more and more ourselves in that aspect. It's the importance of the research that I'm doing is because I know there's more than just one side of the story. Generally, there's even more than 2 sides. That's why we have third parties involved. And so again, when our kids get home from school, it's time to start homeschooling them. Whether they're registered there or whether they're only registered in homeschooling, or you're doing both. Registered in public school, and you can still homeschool them without being registered in any homeschool system. Once you figure that out and you help teach others how to do it, then they can start homeschooling their children without having to register in the education system that still holds them to a curriculum standard. Because now you can develop a standard of your own through your own private homeschooling that surpasses their homeschooling curriculum and says, well, until you can step up to the plate and stand up to my standards, why the fuck are you questioning why I'm not sticking by your standards? Your standards suck. Leave no child behind. That's built on the premise that while this kid can advance farther, he's going to be held back because this kid here that can't keep up is not going to be left behind. He's going to stay. You're going to keep the rest of the class equal with him. Think about the words. Think about that wording. They're holding kids back. They're indoctrinating them. Quit vaccinating them. Start learning how to put forth your statements in an ecclesiastical manner. Again, back to the PMA. When we start establishing communities like this under a PMA, then we've got whole communities. So that no matter what, we end up with communities just like the Amish. You don't have to be Amish, but you can associate and minister and conduct your own private affairs just like that. You know, even the Uniform Commercial Code says uniform throughout the jurisdictions, and it used to be in UCC 1-308, they said that you could reserve your rights by announcing UCC 1-308, all rights reserved, or like wording. And that's all you're doing with your PMA. You're just establishing regulations with like wordings that show that you're separate from them. And if your regulations are holding your standards, the standards of your education amongst your community to a greater standard than theirs, then fuck them. See what I mean? This is the principle. The states have to, the state constitutions have to fall in line with the federal constitution. However, we have an equality among the states. And what that does is that if one particular state comes across and constructs a law that enhances the rights of the people above that of the other states, as well as the federal constitution, it now resides as a superior, a paramount interest in equity, in fairness and impartiality, equality among the law, and it has to abide by the standards of the federal constitution, but it doesn't say anywhere that if it surpasses it and holds that right to a higher standard, then it should be the higher standard in itself. And that's what we as people need to do with our own homeschooling, with our own education and learning. And again, like I said, I'm an adult and I'm still learning. I urge people to put the concept in our younger generation, not necessarily to continue their education with colleges, but to certainly not put their education down. Because again, colleges are just like public education. They're an indoctrination system that delineate your learning behaviors. Your learning behaviors based upon memory skills instead of cognizant, rational, logical thoughts. Even your law schools, based on remembering case law and practicing cases in court in a theatrical setting and acting them out so you can remember how to act, instead of comprehending how you're supposed to naturally behave by instincts. It's one of the most important things about the public education and its indoctrination is it's taking us away from our instincts. So think about this stuff, people. And again, remember, if it wasn't for you people, I wouldn't be doing this. God bless you. Love you. Have a good night. Bye.